Hello, programmers. This is Jesse, and we are going to talk about a very common problem today called hard coding. So this is one of the early assignments in Zybooks, and a student has an issue where they're not earning full points on this, and they're not quite sure why. So let's run this program. Well, first we're going to go over the instructions, and then we're going to run the program. So the instructions are write a program that takes a first name as the input and outputs a welcome message to that name. So for example, if the input is Pat, the output is, hey Pat, welcome to Zybooks. So this is what the student came up with, which was printing, hey Pat, and then printing, welcome to Zybooks. So, and actually put a exclamation mark in there just to make it match perfectly. And so we're going to run this, and you can see that it does indeed provide us the output that we expect. It says, hey Pat, welcome to Zybooks. Now, here's what the problem is. What if the user's name is something other than Pat? What if we want it to be Chris or Zach or Stacy? If it can only accept Pat, then we don't really have the flexibility that we need in this program for it to be a program that fulfills our goal. Because notice here that it's talking about input. If the input is Pat, well, we're not taking any inputs here. So what we need to do is we need to take an input. So we need to say, let's do input. And actually what we're going to do, well, okay, so first let's just do input, and we'll say, um, what is your name? So that could be the input. So let's go ahead and run this now. And it's going to say, what is your name? So we can say Pat and hit enter. And it says, hey, Pat, welcome to Zybooks. So all looks well, but let's run this again. And now we're going to say Susie. Hey, Pat, welcome to Zybooks. So you see, this is the problem with hard coding, is that it's always going to say the same thing when you just tell it to always print, hey, Pat. So what we actually want it to do is first we need to have this input. We need to put that input somewhere because right now it's collecting the input, but it's not doing anything with it. So we need to store it as a variable. So what would be a good name for that variable? Probably just name, right? We could get by with name. So we're going to call this name. So, and we could call it anything we want. We could call it N. We could, it could be anything, but I'm going to call it name. And instead of saying, hey, Pat, I'm going to say, hey, comma, and then name. And now whatever we've stored as name, it's going to put that there. So now I'm going to run this again. And what's your name? So let's suppose that it's Susie, and we hit enter. Now it's saying what we want it to say. It's saying, hey, Susie, welcome to Zybooks. So that is now our program fulfilling exactly the kind of requirement that it's expected to, because it says if the input is Pat, the output is that. So, um, but it is collecting an input and using that input. So this is one way that that could be written, but there's actually even a better way of doing that. And I would say this is with what's called F strings. So I'm going to put F here, and then this is going to be double parentheses, and this is going to be hey, and I'm going to put this in, I'm going to put name here and close parentheses. And this does the same thing, um, but now it's enclosing it as an F string. So now when I run this, what is your name? And we'll say Susie. And it is saying the same thing. It's doing the same thing. But this F string is going to be a more versatile way of doing it than just putting a comma in between, because what the F string does is it takes this name, and by putting it inside of these brackets, um, we can control the spaces a little bit better, and you're going to find this to just be a much um, more pleasant way to incorporate variables into your strings by using F strings than by having commas and pluses linking together all of these different types of um, data structures. So name in this case is a string because whenever you use the input function, it collects it as a string. And so it's recording a string and it's putting it in here. as a string. So you can put a comma between strings and you won't have any problems. But if you start um, getting more complex with it and you're using different data types, you're putting um, uh, integers and floats and booleans and strings all in the same print statements, you really want to be doing it using f strings. That's going to save you trouble if you get used to using this pattern. And I realize it's a little more confusing than writing it as just hey comma name, but you putting it in in these braces here, in these brackets, that is a really um, just nice way of organizing your inputs. All right, so I hope that explains why hard coding is not going to be a universal solution that we need, and why what we really need to do is collect those inputs and store them as variables and use it in our print statements. All right, that's it for this episode, and I will see you guys next time.